And hello.
And hello.
Oh, you guys are already in here. Hi, Angela. Hi, Kayla. Hi, Patrick. Hi, Beauty.
And thank you, Angela. She said my voice flow is incredible for Half-Blood Prince.
I'll have to go back and re-listen. I mean, I thought it was great for all of them, but maybe you just do it particularly well because that's your man's book.
It is my man's book.
Just so motivated.
Maybe. I also just really enjoyed rereading Half-Blood Prince so much. I'm going to open this. Okay.
So I did find out some good news and some bad news today for the literary world.
Okay.
Good news is, I guess there is some optimism that Winds of Winter is coming out in 2022.
Ah! What's the optimism for? What's the reason for the optimism?
I don't know. It was just saying the way that Martin was speaking about it, how it's in the editing phase, and I guess it's not just Martin, but a lot of the people who are also working on the book, like the editor and everything, have been talking about it being released.
Well, I
So,
read this. I went back. Well, I watched a video and then I went back and read his latest post, and he was saying that he was talking about how big of a book it's going to be, and that he's going to need to trim things down with the editing process, and was basically just talking about the editing process, which is a good sign. The fact that he's even talking about the editing process um, is very positive.
maybe you were there.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back, Mike.
Mike's back on the East Coast. Yay! Welcome
Hey,
back.
awesome.
Welcome back to the East Coast. It's great here.
What inspired the move?
Yeah, what made you want to come back? And where on the East Coast?
Well, I mean, you
If
don't
I-
gotta give away too much information. We are still on the internet after all.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Sorry, I got curious. I got
Just want to
curious.
open up the chat on phone too because last stream was
We had no chat to see last time.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
weird. But the negative that happened is I guess the new Harry Potter game, Hogwarts Legacy, may be delayed until
Hi guys, no sound
2020.
question mark?
Wait, what? No, there should be sound. What? There's no sound coming through?
Can any of you Oh, Ben can hear him. Okay.
Okay.
Hi Ben.
I was going to It's happened before where I forget to turn on the mic, so I wouldn't have been surprised, but I could have sworn I turned it on. All right, I'm glad you can hear us.
Kayla has sound. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Maddie, maybe on my end. All right. So you were in the middle of the bad news. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hogwarts Legacy may be delayed till 2023.
Why?
I don't know. They show us an awesome trailer, and then
And then hey, yeah, this thing you thought you were gonna get, yeah, it's not happening.
nope. You're just gonna have to wait long. This is what happened last time, though. They showed us an awesome trailer. It was like coming spring 2022. Actually, just kidding, guys. Fall 2022. Here, have this awesome trailer, though. Never mind.
Mike's in Boston. Oh, you're so close. You're only a few hours away.
Oh, man. And you're in Boston. I mean, that's just great. I love Boston.
I like Boston too. It's a nice city.
I have not spent enough time there.
Me either.
Every minute that I've spent there has been really nice. In terms of like cities go, it's might be weird saying it like this, but it's like a very clean city.
Yeah, for the areas that I've been, it's clean.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you go from the upstate where we are down to like New York City, and the city has like a very distinct smell.
Yeah.
Sure, people from the city don't notice it, but there is like a city smell.
New York.
I didn't get that when I was in Boston.
Well, New York just has a very specific smell.
It's
a smell.
Yeah.
Oh, it's culture shock. He's lived in the Midwest all his life.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, but what a wonderful thing. You got to go to the Boston Aquarium. You got to head out to Cape Cod. There's lots of stuff. You got to go to the Boston market, you just gotta.
Mm-hmm.
What's it called? It's not called the Boston market, but it's called, what am I? You know what I'm talking about.
Kind of.
The big cobblestone market. I can't think of what it's called right now.
I mean, we visited there.
Yeah,
when we went.
yeah.
I can't remember.
There we go. Is that better?
Pretty sure what's that restaurant? Dick's is there.
Oh, that one you've told me about
Yeah.
before. Yeah. Yeah, you said it was in Boston.
I think they've expanded out, but I think the original was in Boston, where you go in and they're just mean to you.
That's the thing, that they're mean to you.
Thing.
That's their gimmick, I guess.
Almost like being served by a bunch of Snapes.
That
Or maybe Sirius, and we're the Snapes.
it's possible. It's possible. We are reading today. Yes, we are continuing on with all the young dudes today. Last time... Oh, P.S. All your readings are excellent. I just happened to be on Half-Blood Prince. I had to pause while during House of Gaunt. Oh, Angela, thank you. Jeez. Ah, House of Gaunt. What a chapter. Don't go down that rabbit hole road. Don't start talking about that chapter. I can't do it. I'll get sidetracked.
You have too much to say.
I know. No discussion about that chapter.
I was trying to move us into all the young dudes with the Snape and everything.
Right, okay.
Get sidetracked already.
What happened last time?
Go ahead. I'm editing earlier chapters, so they all get scrambled up for me.
I'm genuinely trying to remember what happened last time.
Okay.
Remus opened the box and read the letter from his mom.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And then he
had feelings about it.
Curled up and tried not to cry, and then cried a lot.
Yep.
I do know what's going to happen, though.
They're going to go camping.
They're going to go camping.
Yes. They're going to go camping.
Because summer is beginning in this chapter.
Yeah, summer is starting in this chapter. Remus learned to apparate, I think, also.
Yep.
He learned to do it quicker than everyone else did.
Mm-hmm. Because he could smell magic.
Yes.
Or feel magic.
And Lily confessed that she likes James.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Lily confessed that she finally has started to like him. And we talked about how it's great that all of that is happening off-page.
Yeah. You can't touch on it too much.
Oh, great, Tom Longsocks. I love that name, Tom Longsocks.
Right?
It's just a great name. That's awesome. We're glad you're getting into the Marauders story.
It is really good.
It is so good. If you want, I'll just hop right in and we'll start with this chapter.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go, guys. Chapter 114, Summer, 1977, Part 1. Television man is crazy, say when we're juvenile delinquent wrecks. Oh man, I need a TV when I got T-Rex.
That was awesome.
Remus felt strangely untethered arriving at the Potters with all his earthly possessions, moving them into a temporary room. He was going to have to tell somebody what happened, and soon, if he could just get Mr. Potter on his own. But both of James's parents were busier than ever, running in and out of the house on errands, or holding secretive missions which the boys weren't allowed to attend. "But we're all of age," James protested. "You're still my little boy, though." Mrs. Potter kissed his head patronizingly as she cleared their breakfast plates. James looked highly insulted by this babying, but Remus's eyes pricked with tears and he had to excuse himself. They had a week to prepare for the camping trip, and on the very first day set off into the village to purchase a tent. Remus had never been camping in his life, but still found himself better equipped than James, Sirius, or Peter, who were in turns distracted, terrified, and fascinated by every single item in the shop. It fell to Remus to talk to the shopkeeper about boring things like ground sheets and pegs and rigging. In the end, he settled for 2 sensible brown and orange 2-man tents, ignoring Sirius's pleading that he consider a blue and green psychedelic number. The next day, Remus had to check they all had appropriate Muggle clothes, seeing as how they'd be using a Muggle campsite. Then they got a crash course in cooking from Gully the house elf. "Can't the girls do all the cooking?" James whinged as the foul smell of burnt eggs filled the air. Mrs. Potter, who'd been watching with amusement, came up and slapped him lightly round the head. "Some man I've raised here," she sniffed. "If you can't cook a young lady breakfast, don't expect her to spend the night." Mum," James scowled, repulsed, while Sirius and Remus were bent over laughing. They filled the rest of their time planning all of the things they would do with their holiday freedom, watching the matinee at the local cinema. There was a Bond film playing, and Airport 77, which was Remus's personal favourite, and of course flying their brooms. Sirius was very impressed by Remus's recent improvement, and they actually managed to organise a very small Quidditch game. Without the snitch, Peter is keeper. There was no sign of Moody this summer. Mr. Potter explained over dinner one night that security measures on their house had been increased and Moody was back in the Aura's office, managing things there. Remus was relieved. He'd tied Moody and Ferox together in his mind, muddled them all up with the Livia encounter and Dumbledore's cruel single-mindedness. All in all, after the year he'd had, Remus was looking forward to a few weeks away from anyone older than him. It was decided that they would all apparate to Cornwall, except for Peter, who'd failed his test. Mrs. Potter had kindly offered to take him as a side-along before disapparating back home, but Peter insisted on taking the night bus. This way, he decided, he could collect Dorcas on the way. The evening before they were set to leave, James, Sirius and Remus squeezed themselves into the red phone box at the end of the Potter Street to coordinate with what Sirius called the female contingent. "Can I press the buttons, Mooney?" James asked, running his finger over the silvery keypad. "Which bit do you talk into?" Sirius said, holding the receiver up to his eyes for inspection. "Oh, for goodness sake, you two, calm down." Remus dialed Lily's home number, snatching the black plastic receiver back. It rang for a bit, and he hoped that Lily would pick up the phone and not one of her parents. "Good evening, Evans household," a young woman answered. "Lily? Who's speaking, please?" Remus Lupin." There was a very rude, snorting laugh, then the person on the other end shouted away from the receiver. "Lily, it's for you!" Remus shifted from foot to foot, James and Sirius watching him eagerly. "Thanks, pet," Lily's voice said on the other end. "Don't be too long, I'm waiting for Vernon to call." "Hello?" Lily's voice became louder directly into the phone. "Hi, Lily, it's Remus." "Hi, Remus. Sorry, that was my sister. Are you all ready?" "Yep, I think so. Pete's left already, I think. You lot?" "Mary and Marlene got here just before tea. We agreed on 1 o'clock in the afternoon, didn't we?" "Yeah, 1 o'clock, just outside the campsite. I made James get a map." "Oh, good. I think Mum's letting me borrow the A to Z." "Cool." James was tugging on Remus's sleeve. He sighed. Lily, James and Sirius have never used a phone before. Can you talk to them for a minute so they'll leave me alone?" Lily laughed. "Go on then, it'll wind Pet up." Remus leaned back against the glass panes and watched James and Sirius fight over the phone, taking turns to shout something at Lily, then press the receiver to their ears and listen with wonder. Night began to fall around them, and if anyone had walked past, they would have seen 3 village boys mucking about in a phone box without a care in the world. Saturday, 9th of July, 1977. Remus's first time apparating outside of Hogwarts could have gone a bit better, but at least he didn't end up in a tree like James did. He ended up, in fact, about half a mile south of the campsite, on the beach. He'd been to the seaside before, on summer trips at St. Edmunds, 3 times to Margate, once to Southend. He couldn't say he particularly enjoyed these outings, or at least he didn't enjoy them any more than he would have enjoyed sitting in the back garden at St. Edmunds. They were busy, noisy places, full of crying children and barking dogs, and strange, sugary smells and brightly coloured fairground rides. This beach was almost deserted except for a few kids, dots in the distance really, flying a pink and blue kite. The day was warm enough, the sky was blue, and the sand was soft and yellow. He knew he ought to start walking toward the campsite to find the others, but instead he sat down for a few minutes, just to look. The sea wasn't green or bright blue like in picture books. It was more of a concrete kind of grey, still pretty, glimmering under the midday sun. In the far-off distance, Remus could just about make out a long, dark shape on the horizon. Was that France? Might be. He could pretend it was. Remus hadn't been able to relax at the Potters. He'd felt like a visitor there, someone who didn't belong. He didn't know where he did belong. Now that he was 17, he could go anywhere he wanted. Would it be nice to live here, in Cornwall? He'd recently discovered he'd been born in Bristol and wondered what it was like there. That was by the sea, too. Remus had never thought he'd live anywhere else other than London. Once he thought he would probably never leave Essex. Eventually, he felt too guilty and had to go look for the others. The walk was bracing, and after a year of being confined to Hogwarts, it was a thrill just to be able to go somewhere alone. The campsite itself was halfway up the beach on a long stretch of flat, neatly trimmed grass. A few families had already pitched tents, and the mothers and fathers were sitting outside them in deck chairs, soaking up the rare English summer sun with cups of tea and newspapers standing by. Mary, Marlene, James and Sirius were sitting on a picnic bench outside the site office, which was little more than a breeze-block hut. Mary and Marlene jumped up when they saw him. "We thought we lost you." "Overshot," he explained. "Landed on the beach. Not in the water, luckily." "We're all ballsed up a bit," Mary laughed, and they each recounted the strange places they'd ended up. Except for Lily, who'd arrived in precisely the place she'd meant to. She was inside the office, booking them in. This done, the party set about finding the perfect place to pitch their tents. James and Sirius decided this needed to be as close to the beach as possible. Then there was the matter of actually erecting the tents, which was endlessly fascinating to the two pure-blood boys. Lily took charge, channeling her prefect persona, reading out directions and barking out orders. "No, not that hook. I said the one in the corner. Bloody hell, Black, use the flipping mallet, not your boot. Come on, chop chop, we haven't got all day." "Blimey, Evans," James grinned, standing with his arms up, holding one of the poles in place while Mary and Marlene tried to get the canvas over it. Have you ever considered Quidditch coaching? You'd be incredible." "Please, no," Marlene called out, muffled under the heavy fabric. I'll leave the team if I have to put up with both of you blowing whistles at me." It took almost 2 hours, but it was a huge amount of fun, and everyone was very pleased with themselves once all 4 tents were up in a neat row, facing out to sea. "Well done, lads," Lily smiled, sitting cross-legged on the grass while they waited for the kettle to boil. "And no magic at all. You'll make muggles yet." Peter and Dorcas arrived shortly after that, looking very rumpled and tired from their long journey on the night bus. "It stopped at Guernsey twice before we even started south," Dorcas explained, looking vaguely disturbed. Peter accepted a cup of tea and sat in silence, yawning. Once they'd woken up a bit, Mary decided it was time to go to the beach. It was about 3 o'clock by then, but still very warm, and they had hours of daylight left. The girls disappeared into their tents to get into swimming costumes. James and Sirius had been so excited by the prospect of Muggle swimming trunks that they'd been wearing them all day anyway, and Remus, still in jeans and long sleeves, wasn't planning to take off his clothes under any circumstances. He did remove his trainers and socks when they reached the sand, but ignored the others' pleas to join them in the sea. He was happy enough to sit on the bank, enjoying the warm sun on his back and listening to the seagulls screaming overhead. The girls shrieked too as they dipped their toes in the icy cold water, and they made a game of running back and forth with the tide, daring each other to get in. James was knocked over by a wave when he wasn't looking, too busy staring at Lily's long bare legs. Mind you, Remus caught her throwing a few longing glances at him too. Those muscles were pretty hard to ignore. Sirius, as usual, was in a league of his own. He strode out into the surf as if it was as warm as bathwater, and as soon as he was waist deep, dived right under, sleek and graceful as a fish. He swam long, languid strokes and came back looking happier than Remus had seen him in a long time. Afterwards, wrapped in towels, the girls showed the pure-blood boys how to build a sandcastle without any magic, and James and Peter became extremely invested in creating a complicated irrigation system to ensure that the moat was properly supplied at all times. Back at the tents, they cooked dinner. Thankfully, Marlene and Dorcas offered to supervise this, frying bacon over a little gas burner Lily's father had donated. James and Lily went off to the shop, ostensibly for milk, and returned with a case of cider. "Muggle drinks too?" Sirius exclaimed. We're getting a fully rounded experience, apparently, James laughed. Lily giggled, then blushed and looked away. Remus could already see where this evening was heading, and he sat himself as far away from Sirius as possible. They'd already agreed that James and Sirius would share one tent, with Peter and Remus in the other, so at least there would be no awkwardness there. He just had to watch his drinking. Mary had lit a fire using magic, while Lily had gone, "No one tell her, all right? I'm not about to sit here freezing my snatch off while Potter and Black piss about rubbing sticks together." And Marlene had brought a wireless radio, so once the cans of cider had been passed round, it was a very cosy scene indeed. "How long have you two been going out?" Dorcas asked Lily and James. They leapt apart, looking at each other guiltily. "We're not!" Lily squeaked, moving to sit next to Remus as if to prove it. Mary and Marlene exchanged a look, and Sirius shot a confused glance at James. "Oh, sorry," Dorcas smiled, oblivious. "I just thought... But Sirius and Mary, you used to go out, right?" "For my sins," Mary squawked, laughing. Sirius poked out his tongue at her. Marlene, who'd been reading a guidebook she bought in the Visitors' Information Centre, cleared her throat loudly. "There's a castle ruin not far from here. We could go tomorrow." Which swiftly changed the subject to plans for the rest of the week. Camping holidays seemed to involve a lot of walking, Remus realised. He'd hoped his hip would be up to it. A few tins in, and they were all in a very silly mood. The drink was flat and clear, which Remus knew was a dangerous sign when it came to cider. They'd all have skull-splitting headaches in the morning if they weren't careful. He didn't bring it up, though. Everyone was so happy. Why spoil it, worrying about consequences? Dorcas was lying back on Peter's chest, using him as an armchair, humming softly to the music. He was trying to get his hand under her shirt and thought he was being discreet. Mary and Marlene were whispering to each other, bursting into giggles every now and then. James and Sirius were throwing stones into the fire. It was obviously a competition of sorts, but Remus couldn't figure out what the rules were supposed to be. A familiar tune began to play on the radio, Mott the Hoople. It was a few years old now, but it had been a favourite at Gryffindor parties. Billy rapped all night about his suicide, how he'd kicked it in the head when he was 25. Speed, jive, don't want to stay alive when you're 25. "Turn it up!" Mary nudged Marlene, who flicked her wand at the wireless lazily, then cracked open another can. They all hushed to listen, nodding along and tapping their feet softly on the grass. When the chorus came, the girls all sang along in that soft, under-the-breath way that girls were so good at. All the young dudes carry the news. When the song finished, they cheered drunkenly, laughing amongst themselves. "I bloody love you lot," Marlene slurred. "You're all my best friends." "Same to you, McKinnon." Sirius grinned across the flames, raising his can. "Shh." She waggled a drunken finger at him dopily. "I know your game, Black. I'll have you know, you're not my type." Everyone laughed at that, even Sirius. "When are we going to find you a nice girl, Remus?" Lily said thoughtfully, squeezing up to him for warmth and laying her head on his shoulder. He smiled wanly, putting an affectionate arm around her. "Yeah, you deserve a bit of fun, Mooney." James winked at him. Remus avoided Sirius's sudden glare by taking another swig from his can. "I've had plenty of fun with you lot," he said. "Have you ever had a girlfriend, Remus?" Dorcas asked. She didn't mean anything by it. She didn't know them very well, but there was an awkward hush all the same. Or maybe Remus was the only one who noticed. He glanced up at Mary coyly and smiled. "Nah," he said. "Aw," Dorcas said, very tipsy. "How come?" Suddenly it dawned on Remus. Marlene was right. He loved these people. Every one of them. What was the point, keeping secrets from them? This wasn't up to Sirius. This wasn't up to anyone but him. He breathed in and looked at the fire again. "I'm gay," he said. Peter choked on his drink. Out of the corner of his eye, Remus saw James run his hands through his hair, sit up straighter. He saw Mary's mouth fall open and heard Marlene give out a surprised hiccup. He dared not look at Sirius. His stomach turned and he prepared to get up, to walk away and apparate somewhere, anywhere. But then Lily raised her head. She kissed his cheek and hugged him tighter before settling back down against his shoulder. "You still deserve some fun," she said decisively.
Good for you, Remus.
He did it!
He did it.
He finally did it!
Opened up to his friends.
Yay! It's about time. Oh,
Hey, Chris. Glad you could join us.
Chrissa.
And Glenn. I know, Petunia. I love how she calls her pet.
Pet. I know.
Little pet.
Little pet.
No wonder Petunia has such a hatred for her.
A grudge. Oh.
Well, that was a good chapter.
It was a
Everyone
good
getting
chapter.
Together.
It's gonna be a
The
good
good
time.
times.
Yeah.
How is Sirius gonna feel about it? Will Sirius see Lupin's example and be like, so am I?
Probably not.
Probably not. But I think this is probably going to be the turning point where he sees Remus's courage in coming out. He's going to start considering the fact that maybe he's gay too.
Yeah, could be. Well, Sirius is in so much more denial than Lupin.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, what a moment though. It was
I
so
know.
good. I loved how that was written too. He realized how important all these people are to him and how much he loves them, and that if he could tell anyone, he could tell them.
Yep. Hey, Dan.
And then,
Oh, and happy belated birthday to you.
and Lily was just so, "Oh, well, you still need to have fun."
So, let's find you a man, Remus.
Right? Let's find you a man. That's what I would say.
Right, I hope none of the girls there were looking to hook up with Remus. Someone just got super bummed. I mean, I know Lily's going for James.
For James, yeah.
Maybe Mary.
She already had Remus.
Yeah, it doesn't mean she doesn't want seconds.
Ren is like, "I had to pull over just to comment. It feels so good that Remus said the words." It was awesome. What a good moment. Kayla, I don't know if we will ever read Nancy Drew. You're the first person that's ever asked us about Nancy Drew.
Have you read the Nancy Drew books?
No, actually, I never read any Nancy Drew books when I was a kid.
Okay, I haven't either.
I had a bunch.
They're-
I just never read them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my grandma gave me a bunch, but
I just never had them.
there's tons of them.
I know there's a lot.
Yeah, there's tons of them.
Weren't they kind of like
They're like Hardy Boys.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I read the
except
Hardy Boys. Some of their books.
except it's a girl, so it's awesome. Just what a good moment.
It's gonna make everything that happens after this so much harder too. Seems like this summer is gonna be a nice summer.
Yeah, this is
And
gonna be a
then-
good summer.
The beginning of the end, when things start going downhill.
I know
the war starts.
I know that we're in the section of the story now called Till the Very End. So, I mean, next chapter is 115.
Yeah,
We're getting there. Angela says she'd love to hear the Jungle Book.
I wouldn't mind hearing the Jungle Book.
I
either.
would totally read the Jungle Book. I would so down to
A
read
lot of great
that.
characters. You could use some pretty fun voices. With
Oh
too.
yeah, I would love to get my Shere Khan on.
Your Baloo.
Would I need to sing the song? Even though it has nothing to do with the book.
Yeah.
Look for the bare necessities of simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife.
We'll just have a little sound clip for the intro of every chapter with you singing it.
I mean the bare necessities. Oh, Ben is like, yep, Dune.
Yeah.
I'm
Dune.
so down to read Dune.
So many books, so little time.
Bless the Maker and his water. Bless his coming and going. May his passing cleanse the world. I'll comment on every video. Just Dune.
Dude.
We do want to
Oh,
read
man.
Dune. The Dune is definitely on there. We have talked about reading Dune at some point. I know that.
Well,
And
I
I'm
think,
down to read it.
well, we said we're gonna kind of branch out after we finish
Clash
Clash
of
of
Kings.
Kings. And also, I think after we finish all the young dudes, we might start reading a book on stream too.
Yeah,
Whether that be Dune or something else.
I think that's a good idea. We could
But
stream a different book rather than just fan fiction.
yeah, unless someone else. I mean, good
Unless
fan fiction. Most fan fictions aren't as long as this.
no, this
Usually,
is
it's one stream,
yeah,
2 streams. So,
definitely. And we are almost done with the Clash of Kings.
and we're almost done with this.
We only have like 300 pages left in a Clash of Kings.
Mm-hmm.
350 pages, something like that. We're getting there.
Probably like only 10 to 20 more chapters.
Yeah.
I think you already have 2 read. I need to edit them. So yeah, we're getting there.
Tyrion was the last one. And we discussed we did Danny. It's just got to get posted, I'm assuming, right?
Oh, now you don't want to get up now that we got the cord off of you?
Come on, Magnificent Orange. There you go,
There
buddy.
he is. There he is.
But yeah. I know we've had a lot of requests for Dune, and we have a lot of requests for The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And The Hobbit. I lump them together. I still have to finish the Silmarillion. I haven't read it in days. Days and days.
Shame.
I know, I'm like almost halfway through it. I gotta just finish it. Things were getting good too. Feanor,
As good as...
Feanor just burned all of the Talari ships and is being actually very rude. It's getting dramatic. It's getting good.
See, I haven't read it, so...
That means nothing.
That means nothing to me. It sounds awesome.
It's awesome.
means nothing.
It's awesome. Feanor, if anyone has read the Silmarillion, Feanor is kind of a D-bag.
Oh.
I think. Personal opinion. He's kind of a D-bag.
But you know who's not a D-bag? Lupin.
This is true. Let's see.
Let's see.
Let's jump into the next chapter.
Let's see how everyone else reacts. I think the only person out of that group that I could see reacting harshly
He's serious.
Well, maybe Peter. He was the only one whose mouth dropped, and he's been a little bit more aloof lately.
That's true. Chapter 115. Summer, 1977. Part 2. Sweet, handsome friend, I can tell you truly that I've never been without desire, since it pleased you that I have you as my lover. Nor did a time ever arrive, sweet, handsome friend, when I didn't want to see you often, nor did I ever feel regret. Nor did it ever come to pass, if you went off angry, that I felt joy until you'd come back. Nor ever. Tibor de Sarnom. 2 hours later.
You gotta say it in the SpongeBob voice.
2 hours later. Peter and Dorcas were snogging, rolling backwards onto the grass. Everyone was drunk, but they were probably the drunkest. Go back to your tent if you're going to do that. James threw an empty cider can at them. Do you mind, Mooney? Peter surfaced, red in the face and bleary-eyed. If we go back to yours, you can bunk in with Prongs and Padfoot, can't you? Oh, don't worry. Remus waved a hand. I'll find somewhere. Sirius still hadn't looked at him, and he had a feeling that after the night's revelations he would not be particularly welcome. Peter and Dorcas disappeared. There was muffled giggling from within the tent, then the ghostly hollow quiet of a silencing charm. Share with us if you want, Remus, Mary said, getting up to leave for her own tent. Lily nodded. Yeah, our tent is much bigger. Come in with us. Thanks, girls, he smiled. He was really grateful. You go on. I'm not tired yet. Think I'll just go for a walk. He got up, limbs stiff and aching, and headed for the sea. It was probably dark now away from the fire, but Remus had always been able to see in the dark. The tide was in and louder than ever. A cold breeze flew forth, and he fumbled in his back pocket for a cigarette. He lit up and inhaled deeply, closing his eyes, feeling that now he could really think. He was glad he said it, no matter what the reaction, but he still considered leaving. Okay, so they weren't all about to kick his head in, but who knew how they'd all act in the cold light of morning, stark and sober? Was it better or worse than being a werewolf? He could still apparate if he wanted to. Go and look for Grant, maybe. Remus felt a surge of guilt. He hadn't thought about Grant in a while, maybe not all year. The other boy had been so kind to him, taking him in and willing to put up with him indefinitely, and willing to put him up indefinitely. He'd given Remus some excellent advice, too, if only Remus had taken it. Stay away from posh boys. "All right, Mooney." James approached him. Remus turned. Sirius was with him, looking sheepish. It looked as though James had dragged him over against his will. Remus wasn't surprised. "All right," he nodded. He offered James a cigarette. James shook his head no. "Just wanted to see you were okay." "Fine, thanks." "Good." "Sorry if I made things awkward." "You didn't," James said a little too eagerly, as if he'd been hoping Remus would bring it up first. Sirius winced, but only Remus noticed. "Honestly, mate, we're glad you told us, really." Remus just nodded and looked back at the sea, taking another drag on his cigarette. Behind him he heard James nudging Sirius, obviously trying to get him to say something reassuring and friendly, but to no avail. James spoke again. "Don't run off, okay, Mooney?" Remus turned back, raising an eyebrow. James was grinning. "Yeah, we know what you're like. Stay, okay? Everything's fine. Even Pete wasn't that bothered." "Pete," Remus snorted. "He's too busy trying to get his end anyway." "Can't blame him," James laughed. He touched Remus's shoulder. "Do you want to talk about it?" Remus shook his head, looking down. He stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another. Sirius wanted one, he could tell, but Remus was feeling belligerent, and unless Black asked, like a normal human being, he wasn't going to get one. "Thanks, James," Remus said pointedly, exhaling smoke. "You're a real mate." "Still Marauders," James smiled tiredly. He yawned. "I think I'm going to turn in." "Coming?" "I'm going to have another one after this." Remus raised his second cigarette. "I'll have one too," Sirius said gruffly. James nodded, stifling another yawn, and turned away. "Don't come back stinking of fag ash, you two," he threw over his shoulder as he walked back toward the campfire on the turf. Remus returned his gaze to the sea, but handed Sirius the box. He heard him withdraw a cigarette, light up, inhale. He waited for it. "Why'd you say that?" Sirius said. Remus closed his eyes and smiled softly. He didn't want a fight, but he was ready for one. He was always ready. "Wanted to. I just had to know what they'd think, one way or another." "It's like you've just gone and changed everything round on me." He didn't sound accusatory. He sounded hurt. "Didn't mean to," Remus said. "Were you expecting me to say something too?" "No, I wasn't expecting anything," Remus snapped. "It wasn't anything to do with you, actually." "Oh, okay." Sirius raised his hands in surrender, still looking uncomfortable. "Just, I thought you might have told me first, that's all, given the situation." This caught Remus entirely off guard, and he finally looked at Sirius. "You mean you didn't already know? How could you not know?" "You said you weren't," Sirius shrugged. "Like I said, I wasn't. Thought we were on the same page, that's all." Remus found his anger returning. Typical Sirius, never thinking about anything more than his own personal gratification, never once considering that anyone else had feelings or thoughts. "Obviously we weren't," he said coldly. Anyway, I don't see how it matters now. If that's all you're worried about, then don't. You're safe, Remus said stonily. I'm not going to tell anyone about you and me, and I doubt anyone suspects you, what with your considerable history with girls. I don't see why you care so much that I tell people. I do care, Sirius protested. Remus closed his eyes. A few months ago, this would have sounded wonderful, but God, he was so tired. Remus! Sirius sounded half annoyed, half frightened. I can care about you and, not scream it from the rooftops. Wanting to get off with me isn't the same as caring. Remus, fucking hell, just because I haven't got whatever you've got yet, doesn't mean I don't have the same... fuck's sake! Sirius cursed at his own inarticulacy. And all the girls? Remus tutted. That's different. Okay, Remus sighed. His voice was empty. He was willing to leave it there. Sirius wasn't. You don't understand. Remus didn't say anything. He didn't see what he had to understand. He just had to be the stronger one. Sirius continued, a hand on Remus's arm. When I think about myself with them, I can just see it, I know how it's going to play out. I know what I'm supposed to do. When I think about me and you, the real me and you, I can't see how it ends. I try not to think about it. So, I know I was a bit of a dick. I could have handled it better. But I swear I didn't want it to end like that. His breathing was shallow now. Remus could hear his heart rate increasing by the second. I didn't want it to end at all, to be honest. Remus nodded. He pushed Sirius's hand away, gently, looking out at the sea. He knew Sirius was staring at him, but he kept facing forward. Look, Sirius, I don't mean to be cruel. I do understand all that. He really did. Hadn't he been over it all in his own head? I know it's not easy for you. Sirius made a noise of relief at that, seemed to relax slightly. Maybe they were getting somewhere for once. Remus pushed on. But it is easy for me. I'm queer, all right? I know when we started I said I wasn't, and... Well, I shouldn't have said that because I am. And I'm not saying you're queer too, or you have to be or anything, but I couldn't carry on the way we were without you just, acknowledging it. Sirius was watching him very closely as he said this, thinking hard. Remus knew how he looked when he was thinking, when he was working a problem through. It wasn't mischievous or cheeky or sarcastic. It was deeply solemn and serious. It was really bloody sexy, actually, but Remus tried to ignore that bit. Finally done thinking, Sirius gave a short nod. Okay then, he said simply. What? Remus frowned. Fucking acknowledged. Message received. Sirius stubbed out his cigarette in the wet sand. So, what? Remus gaped. We just leave things as they are? Sirius scratched behind his ear, looking down, a strange, shy gesture. I'd rather not. You'd rather not, Remus repeated, dumbfounded. No. I mean, if you want me to go round telling everyone I know, then sorry, but we're not all as ballsy as you. I need more time, but I could try. You could try. This was not the outcome Remus had expected when the conversation began. What do you mean? Sirius cut him off, placing a palm on Remus's cheek to turn it toward him and kissing him gently on the lips. I mean, I'll try, he said as he pulled away. I miss you, Mooney. Oh, you would go and say something like that. Remus grabbed him and pulled him back. It was like water after a drought, shelter in a storm. They were still the point of turning... They were the still point of the turning world and every other stupid, sloppy cliché you could think of. They kissed for a long time, and when they came apart they were practically gasping with relief. No more girls? Remus asked, still holding Sirius in place, as if he might run away. No more girls, Sirius agreed. Let's see how this pans out first. Ah, charming. Remus let go, satisfied. Shut up. Sirius nudged him with his shoulder, hands deep in his pockets. Come on, let's go back to the tent, eh? I'm freezing. They walked back toward the tents and the dying fire with their backs to the wind. I think I'm drunk, Remus said shakily. He felt all stirred up. I make bad decisions when I'm drunk. Sirius laughed and squeezed his shoulder quickly. I know. I'm promising you this isn't one of them. Okay. I'm trusting you. Unfortunately, they found out that none of the tents were available anymore. The tent Remus had been sharing with Pete was well and duly occupied by the sounds of it. Sirius grimaced and cast a fresh silencing spell over the flagging one. Amateurs, he muttered. There was a silencing spell cast over James and Sirius's tent too. Mary poked her hand out of the next one along, giggling. It's James and Lily! Are you serious? Sirius gaped. Bloody hell, I mean... Wow, I kind of want to go in there and shake his hand. I have a feeling his hands are busy, Remus raised an eyebrow. Want to go in with me, Remus? Mary asked tipsily. What about Sirius? All right, fine. I'll get in with Miles. Night, lads. She crawled across the grass into Marlene's tent. Sirius and Remus looked at each other for a few moments before Sirius climbed in first. The girls' tent was much more comfortable than theirs, stuffed with blankets and pillows and a plump blow-up mattress. Knew we should have got the Muggleborns to sort us out, Sirius grumbled as he settled in. The mattress was old and sank slightly in the middle, rolling them together in an almost comical way. In the end, the only way to get comfortable was to curl up like spoons. This okay? Remus asked as he slipped an arm round Sirius's waist. Of course, Sirius replied. We could just sleep sonoro quiesis. Ah, okay. Well, it had been a while. Afterwards, Remus felt more awake than he ever had in his life. His brain was buzzing with questions, declarations, thoughts, words. It felt like coming out of hiding, like pulling back a disguise he'd worn for so long. He wanted to bear every bit of himself to Sirius. He wanted Sirius to see him. Sirius? There's something else I need to tell you. Oh, Merlin, Sirius groaned, rolling onto his back sleepily. What now? I'm homeless. What? Sirius opened his eyes and turned round at once. What? Since I turned 17, you know I'm of age now, so... So they just chucked you out? Remus nodded, glad to share the problem. Yeah, so when Hogwarts finishes next summer, I've got nowhere to go... Bastards! Sirius said angrily. He looked at Remus very seriously. You can stay with me and James at the Potters. They won't mind. I know they won't. That's when school's finished, we'll find our own place. We will? Remus raised his eyebrows. Yeah, Sirius replied happily, folding his arms behind his head. It'll be just like school. You, me, James and Pete, all together. Oh, Remus realised what he'd meant. Yeah, sounds great. I've a bit of money Lyle left me. Sirius replied. I've got enough money for all of us, don't worry about that. Okay, Remus said. I won't worry. Go to sleep, Sirius said. You'll be knackered tomorrow. Okay, Remus repeated, closing his eyes.
Told you. Mary, super disappointed. But my God, Sirius is an idiot. Why didn't you tell me? What more could you want?
I know. Why didn't you tell me?
We need to have a talk, Sirius.
Why didn't you tell me? Oh my God. I guess in Sirius's defense, Remus did say, like, yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just...
I know, but still.
Experimenting? I don't know. I don't know. I think Sirius is just in so much denial.
Yeah, I got nothing for Sirius.
No,
He's an idiot.
Poor Grant.
I know. I wonder if we're gonna see that guy again.
Right? Are we ever going to see Grant again? I feel like the author periodically mentions him, so I feel like we're going to see him again.
He's got to pop back up in the story.
Somewhere.
A little humble brag from Sirius, too. Oh, I got enough money for all of us.
Yeah.
Must be nice, Sirius.
Right? I've got more money than God. Don't worry about it.
It's all dirty money.
Yeah, pretty awful. If Remus would have been honest since the beginning about his feelings, he would have avoided a lot of heartache.
Yes and no. Because I think a lot of the heartache comes from Sirius not being honest with himself.
Yeah.
More than Remus. I mean, yes, Remus definitely brings some heartache on himself, but
yeah,
I think the big X factor here is Sirius in his total denial.
Well, Remus could have tried to make it work with Christopher.
But he didn't want Christopher.
Yeah. He wanted Sirius.
Exactly. And he got Sirius.
Yeah, Sirius is like, I'll try to do this. Also, Lily and James.
Mm-hmm. Silenced.
Silencing spell on the tent. Lily and James.
He could have told Sirius about his pain every time he saw him with girls, but didn't. I mean, yeah, he could have.
He could have. But this is also the 70s, and coming out as gay today is so hard.
I was gonna say, I think it's just kind of like well, throughout the story, he's been depicted as a person who really doesn't want to express his problems or
yeah, he keeps a lot of stuff really kind of bottled up.
Unload his burdens on anyone else.
I
think it's partly from his upbringing.
Can you do me a favor? I forgot to ask you this before. Do I still smell like giraffe?
No.
Okay, cool. I had to ask.
Okay. And in case anyone's wondering what giraffe smells like, they smell like stink.
No, only boy giraffes smell like stink.
Okay. Boy giraffes smell like stink.
Johari didn't smell like that.
Either way.
Just saying, she doesn't. It's just Oliver. He's a stinky.
Okay. But hey, Peter's moved on from Desdemona.
I think he has a thing for D's.
I thought that was Remus.
Everyone likes D's in this story, I guess. I don't know.
Except James. He's more of a flower man.
Yes. He's unique. Something him and Snape have in common, I guess.
Something I forgot to mention in the last chapter. Now I kind of want to see a story of Petunia and Vernon. How did they come to be?
Oh my god. Yes. Where's the Petunia and Vernon meet cute? How did that happen?
I hate everything. Me too.
Let's hate it together. Yeah, I have questions about that.
What's your favorite color? Beige. Mine too.
Where do you want to live? The suburbs? Me too.
How do you want to decorate our house? Like everyone else's. Marry me.
I like to peek over the fence and listen to what our neighbors are saying. I like drills. And making money. This could work.
Yeah, that's true love right there.
I guess so.
There's someone for everyone.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is, apparently.
It just would be great.
I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I'm sure it's out there.
Maybe that will be the next fanfic we read.
I know there's fan fictions out there where Dudley has a magic child and Harry has to
teach Dudley.
Yeah. And they grow closer through the journey of that.
I'd like to think that Harry and Dudley kind of put everything in the past. I mean, they were just kids. Dudley bullied him a lot, but Harry kind of gave it back once he could do magic.
In the Cursed Child play, there's a scene where Harry talks to Albus, his son, and he gives him a baby blanket. And it was his baby blanket, and he explains that it was his baby, it was Harry's baby blanket.
Yeah.
And that Dudley had gotten it from Petunia because Petunia had put it away. Mm-hmm. And Dudley had it, and that years later, Dudley gave it to Harry.
Oh, okay.
So there's obviously been some kind of reconciliation. But unfortunately, it's not canon. So
I was about to say, now it's canon.
I'm just saying that
Dudley origin story would be great too. Just them as kids.
Like little kids?
Yeah. It would honestly just be kind of...
It'd be like chapter 1 of Harry Potter the entire time.
Chapter 1. Dudley gives Harry a swirly. Chapter 2. Dudley punches Harry.
Yep. Over and over and over and over and over. Chapter 4. Harry is locked in his cupboard again.
So I'm going to get a little bit more coffee and then we'll move on.
Sure.
Next chapter.
Yeah.
See if we can finish the whole summer tonight.
Maybe we can do it. I don't know. We've got about an hour left.
Well, you said there was 4 parts, right? We're halfway through.
There's 5 parts. Maybe.
Do it.
All right, here we go. Chapter 116, Summer 1977, Part 3. Remus woke up and stretched beneath bright canvas, Sirius breathing lightly behind him. It was a bit too warm and sticky, but he wouldn't have moved for anything. Lying peacefully under the blankets, he could still taste the salt on Sirius's skin, feel his heartbeat. At the bottom of the sleeping bag, their feet were tangled together. Sirius stirred, screwing up his face before he opened his eyes. Morning. Morning. Fuck me, my mouth is dry. Yeah, mine too, Remus agreed, running his tongue over his teeth. All that cider. I could go and get some water from the pump. Yeah, we'll both go. Reckon anyone else is up? Remus listened carefully.
You can go. I just think it's funny that they're talking about being thirsty and Bailey's just gulping down water behind us.
He's so handsome. He's so handsome. Remus listened carefully, then shook his head. He hoped Sirius wasn't worried about getting caught. Surely no one would question their sharing a tent. What else could they have done? It was probably a bit too early to start interrogating Sirius, so Remus held his tongue as they dressed quietly and quickly, fishing out in the bottom of the bed for their clothes, which seemed to have scattered in the night. Clambering out and blinking hard against the bright daylight, Remus thought that everything seemed to look different. The same, but not quite as he remembered it before. More realistic, solid and anchored down. They sauntered off in the direction of the water pump with their canteens, and as they walked, they fell into step, and Remus felt as though his heart would burst with joy. Stupid, really, such a small thing. The campsite was lovely and peaceful, sparrows darting between the trees overhead and the occasional camper popping their head out and wishing a polite "good morning" to the boys as they passed. The water pump was by the shower block, and they both ducked in to wash their faces quickly before filling their canteens, as well as the others they'd brought. "Shop sells pasties," Sirius said thoughtfully, nodding in the direction of a little wooden hut with a blue and white striped awning. Shall we get some for breakfast, return to the camp as heroes?" "Good idea," Remus smiled shyly. They bought far too many Cornish pasties, but they were fresh out of the oven, flaky and buttery and warm, and Sirius had no impulse control. Back at the tent, no one had stirred yet, apparently, so Remus and Sirius decided they would take their breakfast on the beach. They sat on a sand dune, side by side, munching peacefully and licking the grease from their fingers afterwards. "I could get used to this," Sirius said with a grin, rubbing his hands on his jeans, sighing happily at the view. The sand had been washed clean overnight by the tide. Everything was perfect and unblemished. "Never been on a proper holiday before." "Me neither." Remus wiped his own hands on his corduroy trousers and picked restlessly at the grass. "Oi," Sirius said. "What's up, Mooney?" "We said no worrying." "Sorry." "What's up?" "I was just wondering something. It's stupid, don't worry." They were quiet again. Remus fidgeted some more. He sighed. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Why me, in the first place? Why not James or literally everyone else? Anyone else? Is it because I let you? Path of least resistance?" "Obviously not," Sirius scoffed, frowning. "What do you mean, why not James? I don't fancy James." Oh. "I think we can at least admit we fancy each other." Sirius raised an eyebrow, thumbing Remus's hip through the thin fabric of his t-shirt. Remus nodded. "Yeah, I just thought, I don't know." "We never touched much." "What?" "Before all the shagging," Sirius said matter-of-factly. "I used to wrestle with James all the time, and we'd share a bed sometimes and everything. Not you. You kept yourself separate. No touching." "I was shy." "It got me really curious, I suppose. One Christmas, remember when Andromeda came to the Potters? I was really nervy, convinced my mother was coming to get me every 5 minutes. I jumped whenever the door went." "I remember," Remus said softly. "3rd year." "Well, the door went and I was bricking it. We were on the landing, I think. You sort of squeezed my shoulder and, well, it felt really nice. It meant more because it was you. I felt like you'd, I don't know, chosen me or something. Couldn't get you out of my head for weeks." "We were 14. "So?" "You and Mary started going out not long after that." "Yeah, look how that turned out." Sirius huffed a laugh. Remus laughed too, despite himself. "Then on your birthday," Sirius said, his voice faltering a bit, as if it were a difficult thing for him to talk about. You kissed me." "I did," Remus replied steadily. "Sorry." "I didn't expect it. It was so out of the blue. I'd been thinking about you before that, but I didn't really know. I didn't know I was thinking about that. Then I thought, maybe it was my fault, like I'd given off some sort of message, like I'd tricked you into something." "What? No, trust me, I very much wanted to kiss you." "Oh, good. Because I just felt so awful about it, you know. It was your first kiss, and I went and mucked it all up." Remus sighed. "Look, while we're being honest, you might as well know it was not my first kiss." "What?" "Yeah, the summer before I sort of met someone. I never told any of you. I didn't want you to know I was queer." "That boy," Sirius said suddenly, "and the muggle squat in Mile End. His name is Grant." Remus explained. Well, I hate him. Remus laughed. That's okay, he's so nice he won't even mind. I hate him even more. I ought to try and see him this summer. He's been so good to me, you don't even know the half of it. I'll go with you if you want. Thanks, that's kind. Mooney, Sirius said quietly. I'm really sorry about everything. It's okay. It's not. It is. It's not. Sirius, for fuck's sake, you can't even apologize without starting a fight. I'm telling you, it's okay. I was being unfair. I think I was asking you for something I don't even understand properly myself. Loyalty or love or whatever. I do love you, Mooney. I love all of you. You, James, Peter. Yeah, Remus sighed. He closed his eyes as if to reset the conversation. When he opened them again, Sirius looked anxious. Remus smiled reassuringly. Looking forward to 7th year? Dunno. Bit scary, isn't it? You mean the war? The war, Sirius agreed. Other stuff too. Last year before we have to grow up. Remus laughed softly. I don't think you'll ever grow up, Padfoot. I've been so selfish. Sirius had turned melancholy again. I said it's fine. It's not, though. His brow creased slightly as he searched for the words he needed. Remus held his breath, not sure what was coming, but somehow knowing he needed to hear it. You have so many secrets, and it must be so shit keeping things back, Sirius began, gaining momentum the more he spoke. And I made it worse. I just gave you more things to hide. I've loved keeping your secret, Remus wanted to say. I'd keep 1,000 more for you. He knew that this line of thinking could only make things worse, so he said nothing. Sirius risked reaching out, grasping Remus's hand and holding it. Remus squeezed back. It's not that I'm ashamed of you or this, it's a million other things. I wish I could tell everyone. I wish I was ready. I will be, Mooney. I promise. Sirius looked at him, full of pleading. Remus forgave him wholeheartedly. It wasn't difficult to meet his eyes anymore. James seemed pretty okay with me being queer, Remus prompted quietly. He felt a bit underhanded bringing up James. James belonged to Sirius. It wasn't Remus's business to interfere. Of course he was, the beautiful bastard, Sirius snorted. Fucking prince among men, isn't he? I know he'd probably even be fine with this. He gripped Remus's fingers. But he's my best friend, and I just don't want to change that yet. I wouldn't want to be alone with him and have him wondering, even if he wasn't thinking about it. I would be. Okay, Remus said. He was agreeing to everything. He knew it was stupid, but it was so easy now. Morning, lads, Mary called from the campsite. Sirius pulled his hand back quickly, giving Remus an apologetic glance. Cheers for the pasties! They both turned around and waved at her. Sirius got up, extending an arm to help Remus to his feet. Come on, he said, eyes twinkling. I can't wait to rip the shit out of Prongs for finally getting his leg over. Not in front of Lily, Remus cautioned. She'll curse your knob off. Well, we can't have that. I'm very attached to my knob. Sirius? Remus? This isn't just for the summer, is it? Sirius looked at him and grinned. I bloody hope not. Fortunately, no one was much interested in whatever Sirius and Remus had been up to the night before, because everyone else's night had been just as eventful. Peter gave him a bit of a wary look, but that might have been the hangover. Mary was grinning at everyone like the cat who'd got the cream, picking at her pasty and trying to catch Lily's eye. Marlene was bundled up in blankets, looking very green round the gills and giving out the occasional moan. "All right, Miles?" Remus asked gently. Poor Poor love, Mary tutted, patting her friend's blonde head gently. Went a bit hard on the old Rosie, didn't ya? Still, could be worse. Dorcas hasn't come back from the loos yet. James and Lily were sitting next to each other, but not too close. Lily had scraped her hair back in a pigtail and was consciously staring at the ground, eating a pasty with a quiet resignation. James looked absolutely chuffed, but was trying not to show it too much. So, Mary grinned widely, looking around at everyone. We'll stick with the new sleeping arrangements for the rest of the week then, shall we? Suits me, Sirius said casually. And me, Peter nodded, mouthful of mince. Marlene gave a silent, queasy thumbs up. James and Lily looked at each other, then looked away. Once everyone had finished eating, the girls arranged an expedition to the shower block. The boys followed after, towels under their arms, and Sirius teased James mercilessly. No, go away, I'm not telling you anything, James laughed. This is purely for academic purposes, Sirius chided. It's going to be a matter of historical interest. Future generations will want to know what miraculous feats you had to perform in order to finally convince Evans to... We just talked. Oh, so the silencing spell was for... James turned bright red and disappeared inside a shower cubicle. Sirius chucked triumphantly. Doesn't anyone want to know about me and Dorcas? Peter said innocently. The castle ruins were about 5 miles' walk, which no one seemed to think was too far at all. Marlene had perked up a bit after showering and eating, and everyone decided the fresh air was probably the best cure for a hangover. They zipped up their tents, stuffing valuables into rucksacks, along with some leftover pasties and bottles of water, and set out round 11. They followed a footpath along the shoreline, which curled round and gradually steepened into a cliff. The view at the top was breathtaking, but Remus was struggling to enjoy it much. His eyes watered and his legs burned with the effort of climbing uphill. Sirius, Mary and Marlene had raced to the top, Marlene coming first despite her queasiness. James surprised Remus by slowing down to match his own shambling crawl. All right there, Mooney, he asked cheerfully. Brilliant, Remus panted, not sure if he was pulling off sarcasm or just sounded like a terrible liar. We're in no rush, take it easy. Padfoot wasn't too much of a tosser last night, was he? About the whole, about the stuff you told us? Remus shook his head, focusing on breathing and the horrible grind-click noise that had started happening in his hip every time he stepped forward. Good, James nodded, relieved. I just worried he might be... Well, you know what his family was like about that kind of thing. Was in 2 minds about leaving him alone with you, to be honest, but I thought you'd just give him a thump if he got out of order. Everything's fine, Remus wheezed. Don't worry. Good, James said again and stopped, because Remus had, just for a moment. The other 6 had crested the hill by now and were disappearing down the other side. They'd only been walking for 20 minutes, Remus thought grimly. He wondered if he could apparate ahead, but the deliberation part would be hard without a map or having seen the place before. He was embarrassed having James stay back with him, but at least it wasn't one of the girls. Sorry, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Usually not this bad so far away from the moon. It's fine, James shrugged. We're on holiday, not a route march. Don't you want to catch up with Lily? I'll be fine. Giving her a bit of space. I think she's embarrassed. She really likes you, though, Remus said encouragingly. She told me. I know, James smiled, getting that dopey, dreamy look as he started over the cliff top. Can't believe my bloody luck. He cleared his throat. But it was just talking, all right? That's the party line. Don't say anything to Black. Remus laughed, straightening up. I won't. They began to walk again steadily. The sun was reaching its highest point, blazing above them so that they had to squint or look at their feet. We talked about you, actually, James said. Well, Lily did. I listened. Who? Yeah, nothing horrible, I promise. I think it was probably just the cider and we were both rambling about how you were such a good mate, and then she said something about being brave and making your feelings known and living honestly, or... I don't know, I was too busy being amazed she was even talking to me. Remus smiled at James and wanted to hug him on Lily's behalf. They reached the castle 2 hours later, a good half an hour behind the rest of the group, who'd waited for them. "Sorry," Sirius said once they were out of earshot of the others. "I didn't think." "I'm fine," Remus smiled, trying to hide his exhaustion. "I had prongs." "There's a local bus that goes back to the campsite. I checked," Sirius said gallantly. "We can get that back if you want." "I'm fine." The castle was a ruin, beautiful grey stone in the summer sunshine, cast against the glistening sea hundreds of feet below. Remus could barely believe anyone had really lived there. The narrow spiral staircases had crumbled and led nowhere. Long grass and bright yellow dandelions had invaded what once might have been a great feasting hall. There were narrow slits in the remaining walls, and graffiti carved into the parapets, where no doubt some bored soldier had once waited 1,000 years ago. Perhaps he hadn't been much older than they were. War never changed. James, Peter, and Sirius began a very enthusiastic sword fight with some stray sticks they'd found, while Remus sat rolling up cigarettes on a pile of rocks, watching them. "You'd feel a lot fitter if you didn't fill your lungs with that shit," Marlene tutted. "Here for a good time, not a long time, Miles," he replied dryly, licking up the adhesive strip on his paper and sticking it down carefully. He made 4 or 5 just to pass the time, tucking them neatly into an old matchbox he'd saved for the purpose. He watched Sirius playing the knight against Peter's dragon, and laughed as James captured Lily, apparently now a princess, hoisting her effortlessly over his shoulder and running for the castle gates. She laughed and beat her fists against his back playfully, and when he put her down, she looked so happy in his arms. Eventually, some of the other tourists started to get a bit annoyed with the 8 teenagers mucking about, so they decided it was time to go back down to the beach and spend rest of the afternoon cooling off in the sea. Lily and James led the group this time, hand in hand, chattering happily as if they'd been this intimate for years. A pang of envy shot through Remus. Not that he wanted to hold Sirius's hand. For one thing, it was much too hot. For another, you couldn't keep Sirius still long enough. "You lot go ahead," Sirius called. "Me and Mooney are having a fag break." Marlene tutted once more, but hurried to catch up with the others. Remus and Sirius sat on a stone wall for a bit, smoking. "There's a pub down there," Sirius nodded further up the lane. "Saw it on the way up. It's got a garden. Want to go there and waste some time?" "Yeah," Remus said, surprised. That sounded ideal. "But don't you want to catch up with James?" "James doesn't love me anymore," Sirius sighed dramatically, holding his wrist against his forehead like an old woman about to faint. "His heart has been claimed by another." Remus laughed, then dared to say, "Oh well, you've got me." "I've got you," Sirius nodded with a grin, hopping down from the wall. "Come on then, could murder a pint." The pub was a small whitewashed cottage with mustard yellow shutters, a red tile roof, and a neat row of red geraniums planted in pots outside. Inside was dark, musty, and cavernous. Remus had to duck under the low ceiling. The gruff working men propping up the bar all turned to look as they entered, and for a moment Remus wondered if it had been a bad idea after all. Still, Sirius ordered 2 pints of lager, and they took them outside to the garden, sitting on a table underneath a beech tree for shade. As they headed out, the surly barman and unfriendly locals turned back to their own drinks, obviously deciding to ignore the 2 boys. Remus was sure he heard one of them mutter, "bloody toffs," which he took as a personal slight, though of course it could have been much worse. Still, they were alone in the garden and had the privacy they'd been seeking. Sirius was impervious to the attitude of others. Maybe he didn't notice. Maybe he just didn't think muggles were worth worrying about. "It's great here," he said, gulping down his foggy warm beer. "Do you think we could live here when it's all over?" "I like London," Remus replied. "It's what I'm used to." "Remember you promised we could go to Carnaby Street?" Sirius said, playing with Remus's matchbox. "This summer. I'm holding you to it." "When did I say that?" "Christmas." "Oh, right. Okay, we'll go." "I can't believe you forgot." "Well, you spent half of Christmas trying to convince me to get a girlfriend, so..." "Ugh," Sirius groaned, apparently in shame. Sorry. I thought it might help me, feel less attached to you. Sounds a bit bonkers now that I think about it. Now it sounds bonkers. Remus kicked him under the table. Logical thought processes are not my forte, Mr. Mooney. Sirius laughed with an aristocratic turn of his head. You ought to make your peace with it if we're going to, Start going out? Remus prompted gently. Sirius gave him an apologetic smile. Going out, yeah, he agreed. Sorry. You'll get there, Remus said casually, gulping his pint. And with that the ice was broken and they began to talk. And talk. It was that easy. After months of failure to communicate, it seemed that the gates had now been flung wide open. They found that once they'd begun, they couldn't stop. Remus would relate some assumption he'd made, some belief he'd had about an interaction long ago, and what he'd thought it meant at the time, and Sirius would shake his head with wide, earnest eyes and say, But Mooney, it wasn't like that at all. When it came down to brass tacks, Remus discovered that much of his misery was his own making, that most of the time Sirius had never meant harm, and often hadn't even known he was causing Remus any pain at all. It was just his own bungled idea of what was going on. They even talked about Mary. I really did like her, he said. I think that's what threw me off in the beginning. You know, it wasn't like girls weren't doing it for me in that department, and she was so confident. I just thought you were with her because you didn't want to be with me. No, Sirius said firmly. That's a horrible thought. It was for her, not for you. He looked at him. Sorry. Don't be. That makes me feel better, actually. Anyway, Sirius smirked, what about you and Mary? Oh, God. Remus buried his face in his hands. Don't, I'm so embarrassed. It's fine. I liked it. Sirius raised an eyebrow, giving Remus a look so sultry it would probably get him arrested in some parts of the country. I noticed, he blushed. Didn't help you feel less attached, then? Obviously not. I couldn't believe you didn't mind that. And yet when you found out about Chris... Sirius straightened up, looking annoyed. Him. There's nothing between us. We're just friends. And this other bloke, Grant, was he... Sirius shifted, obviously uncomfortable as he struggled to get the word out. Your boyfriend? Not really, Remus replied easily. It's hard to explain. He's a friend. I care about him as much as I do you and James and Peter and the girls. No more secrets, Remus. Sirius ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. I can't keep track. I don't know how you do it. Can you stop hiding stuff? From me, at least? I don't know how, Remus said quietly. It'll be hard. But you can try? Sirius smiled. Remus chuckled and nodded. They finished their drinks and decided to head back to the campsite. I'll teach you to swim, Sirius offered. Fuck off, you will, Remus snorted. Is there anything else you've been keeping secret, eh, Remu? Sirius nudged him as they meandered slowly downhill. It was much easier the way back, but they were going very slowly anyway. Nope, Remus laughed. He felt light as air. It was like being high, having nothing to hide at all. Queer, illiterate, homeless, werewolf. He ticked them off on his fingers. I think that's it. Oh, and my mum. Your mum? I got a letter in that box of depressing stuff from Dumbledore. Photos and a letter. An apology. Oh, blimey, okay. What did it... No, I don't want to talk about it yet. Sorry. Fine, Sirius shrugged. Let's say we can talk about anything at all, except our mothers. Perfect, Remus nodded.
Two people with mommy issues.
What a pair. What a pair. Yeah, right?
Hey, Ada.
Oh, it's okay, you're late. It happens. Can always go back and watch again.
Glad you can make it.
So right now, Angela, we are in the middle of the summer before 7th year.
Yes. the camping trip where James and Lily fall in love,
Yep.
or at least realize that they're in love.
Yes. James is definitely a great dude in this story.
Yeah. And I agree. I can't really stand him in the Harry Potter books, in a sense, from what we hear. But at the same time, I think this fanfic, this is more how I picture James after we finish the Harry Potter books. Just because there's so much back and forth. He was this great, awesome guy, kind of full of himself, but great, awesome guy. Oh, he was horrible. He did all this bad stuff to Snape. And then you finally get in the middle somewhere
Um,
near the end.
Angela, Katie, and I have been wondering the same thing if AIDS is going to play a part in the story at some point.
What was your theory that
Katie
he was gonna find out that Grant?
Katie was worried that some point in the story when if Grant comes back into the picture, he will be sick with AIDS.
You know, I could kind of see that happening soon because they're talking an awful lot about him right now.
Yeah.
Kind of making you think more about it, and that would definitely be one of those good heart-wrenching twists.
It would definitely be a shocker for sure, and a big gut punch if they did that.
And also have to say, Maddie, you kind of predicted it there. Remus finds out if he had just been more honest. So much heartbreak could have been avoided.
He literally did it to himself this whole time. Sirius just being like, if you'd have said something, how would I know that this was killing you? You never told me.
Yeah.
Oh, Remu.
But, like, you know, it's just the way he was brought up, he just had to keep everything inside. It's hard for him to open up.
Angela, I am very, very sorry that happened.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That sucks. I would think it would be amiss if AIDS didn't at least play some kind of role in this story. I mean, Lily and James are murdered in 1980.
Yeah.
Or, what was it, 81? 80?
82.
80, either way. Early, James... all of this stuff, the First War, everything, all of this stuff takes place in the late 70s, in through the 80s, and then the rest of the story is going to continue on through the 80s. So
yeah. So I think we're leading up to the reveal that Grant will have AIDS.
Katie predicted this like months ago.
She did.
So I'll have to give her credit for that.
Yeah. But... And I mean, yeah, it is.
Maybe
time period it would have to come in, but I think now is the time. I think they're building up to it.
Angela's also making a good point. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It is a fantasy novel, so
that's true.
Story, so
how sad do you want to make? I mean, everyone describes it as this super heart-wrenching story, and we already kind of know some of the things that are going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think that would be one of those twists that no one would expect.
Maddie says she was a little girl, but she remembers when AIDS was first talked about, a neighbor found out his wife had infected him and he stabbed her to death.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, I remember learning about it when I was a kid.
I mean, that's...
But it wasn't... learning about it in the 90s wasn't like what it was like in the 80s.
No.
You know, people were getting it, they didn't know what it was, and then it was this awful, it's the gay plague thing, and it was horrible. I can't even...
if you're interested in looking into a little bit more about that whole plague and
Oh
the
my
stuff
God,
behind
Angela, jeez.
it,
She's from San Francisco.
oh,
Oh my
sweet.
God, oh my God,
The
what a huge gay community. Like,
yeah,
I can't even imagine how that must have been. Oh, it must have been awful.
a great documentary to watch is actually the Fauci documentary on Disney Plus, National Geographic.
Oh, you've told me about that. Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
talk about him dealing with
The AIDS crisis.
yeah, comparing it to the coronavirus and the pandemic that is going on, and how people hated him back then, and how he dealt with that, and how he's dealing with so many people hating him now.
Yeah, yeah.
Very interesting.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Oh no, you didn't bum us out. You didn't bum us out. I just it's just crazy. Just wild.
But on the note, I mean, stabbing your wife is definitely overkill, but if she knew about it and still gave it to him, I would be pretty mad too.
Yeah, I mean, if I knowingly gave someone HIV, that person has every right to be extremely furious with me.
Yes.
Well, wasn't there a story about a guy who was revenge giving it to women? He was infecting women on purpose.
I haven't heard about this story, but
I think there was
say that there isn't that story.
I feel like I read that somewhere, but my brain is not. I don't know.
Gather round, children. Let me tell you about the dark days. The
Crazy.
dark times.
Oh, my ankles hurt from being on my feet today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
heavy drug use. Okay, fair enough. He might have
it
been.
Wasn't bath salts. He would have eaten her afterwards.
That's crazy, though. What happened in your neighborhood? Well, this happened in my neighborhood. Ooh. Oh, my ankles.
What? From being on your feet all day?
Yeah, they achy a little bit.
So, to take your mind off that, you think we have time for one more?
I think we could get through one more.
I know we can't finish the whole summer, but we can come pretty darn close.
Yeah, we'll just have one more chapter to finish the summer. All right, here we go.
What do you think's going to happen in this next one?
There will be homophobia. Because there's a content warning for homophobia.
Oh, okay. Well, there kind of was in that last one.
All the people in the pub staring at him. Let's find out. Chapter 117. Summer 1977. Part 4. Content warning for themes of homophobia in this chapter. The rest of the week in Cornwall passed in complete bliss as far as Remus and Sirius were concerned. They spent long, hot days on the beach and hillsides, wandering through quaint little villages, exploring caves and getting tipsy in pub gardens. They dined exclusively on pasties, fish and chips and ice cream, and at night... Oh, the nights were the best of all. During the day, if the others were around, they would toss a ball back and forth across the sand, or Remus would consent to paddle in the sea a little, jeans rolled up and long-sleeve shirt still firmly on. It was just the two of them. If it was just the two of them, then he might roll the sleeves up to his elbows, exposing old scars, and Sirius would become Padfoot and chase Styx or his own tail. And they often got to be alone because everyone else seemed to want to keep sneaking off. James and Lily were the worst. When they weren't bickering, they were snogging, gratuitously and at length. "You're supposed to be prefects!" Mary yelled at them after the third night, finding them practically horizontal in front of the campfire. "Oh, as if I haven't caught you 100 times on my rounds," Lily laughed, getting up and straightening her clothes nonetheless. "And you, Black, so you can stop leering." "What?" Sirius blinked innocently. He was carrying back the bowl of washing up from the shower block. Remus had been pretty amazed by that. Sirius had volunteered to do the dishes every night so far. "I quite like doing it the Muggle way," he'd confided secretly. Mother used to make us do the house elves' work as a punishment sometimes, but I just found it to be relaxing, to be honest. Don't draw me into your sordid escapades, Sirius was saying prudishly, setting down the tub. I've been a perfect gentleman all holiday. I'm not convinced you haven't been sneaking off with some muggle girl in the village, Marlene said. She was lying stretched out on a towel in her underwear, sunbathing. Her body was very long and very pale. How dare you! Sirius flicked her with the damp tea towel, making her yelp and crease up. I've been tucked in bed early every night, haven't I, Moony? Remus choked on the crackers he'd been nibbling on and had to be slapped on the back by James a few times before he recovered. You'll pay for that later, Black, he glared at Sirius, eyes watering. Once James had calmed down about the Lily Evans event, as Sirius was calling it behind his back, enough to think straight, he'd been surprised that Sirius and Remus were now sharing a tent, and suspicious, for all the wrong reason. You're not going to start fighting again, you two. You know you only wind each other up in close proximity. Right you are, Prongs, Sirius said brightly. You bunk in with Moony and I'll share with Evans. That put an end to that line of questioning, but not to James's sudden overprotectiveness of Remus. It was nice, certainly nothing to whinge about, but a bit uncomfortable. Remus had never had any kind of big brother figure, unless you counted Stee or Craig, who taught him to steal and drink and throw a proper punch, but James now seemed determined to do his clumsy, kind-hearted best. Midway through the week, Remus was a little surprised that no one had so much as mentioned the confession he'd made on the first night. Not that he wanted anyone to make a fuss or say anything sly or backhanded, but still, nothing at all. He brought it up with Sirius in a quiet moment, and he laughed. Well, if Prongs gave everyone else the bloody speech, I'm not surprised. Speech? Yeah, he pulled me aside and told me if I started treating you any differently, he'd thump me. Probably didn't say that to the girls. Maybe Lily did them. Sirius stretched out doggishly, lying on his front. They were lounging on the beach, alone, on a quiet stretch of sand which so far no one else had discovered. Sirius was in his swimming trunks, and Remus was taking the opportunity to stare at him as much as he liked, and as brazenly as he liked. Every now and then he gathered a handful of silky yellow sand and poured it over Sirius's skin, just to watch the grain slide like water over the muscles of his back. You're having me on, Remus said lazily, not believing Sirius. Wish I was. I swear it was so hard not to laugh in his face and just tell him everything. He rolled over, brushing the sand away carelessly. I'm going to go have a wash off in a minute if you keep doing that. That's the idea, Remus smirked. Sirius in the sea was his new favourite thing to look at. Remus still didn't really believe him, not until the very last day of the holiday. They were all trying to pack up the tents, which didn't seem to want to fit back into the bags they'd arrived in, and Remus had ended up taking over because Peter, Sirius and James couldn't seem to understand the concept of instructions. The girls had deconstructed their own camp in less than an hour, and it was getting a bit shameful. Right, that peg needs to come out first, and there's a sort of top sheet we need to remove. Otherwise everything gets tangled up, Remus said, scratching his head. Sirius did this successfully and began folding up the brown canvas. What would we do without you, Moony? James chuckled. Yeah, Peter said from the ground where he was collecting pegs. Who'd have thought you'd be good at all this stuff? Well, I have always been the sensible one, Remus murmured, not really paying it any mind, skimming the next few steps in the leaflet. Then he realized it had gone quiet and James was standing over Peter. What do you mean, this stuff? Peter looked up, confused, and rubbed his hands together. You know, outdoorsy stuff. Blokey stuff. I didn't mean... Pete, a word, James said, his voice weirdly hard and flat, channeling Euphemia Potter in a stern mood. He marched off toward the beach, Peter following nervously behind. Blokey stuff, Sirius muttered, though he looked anxious and pale too. What was all that about? Remus asked, going over to pick up the pegs that Peter had put down. Sirius shook his head and didn't speak again until Peter and James returned, Peter looking very shaken. Remus wished he could have said something, but he felt like he only might make the problem worse. When it came to say goodbye, nobody wanted to leave. Remus found himself staring glumly down at the 4 yellow squares of grass where the tents had been, while James and Lily clung to each other, saying their goodbyes. "You going back to Essex, Remus?" Mary asked cheerfully. "Staying with the Potters for a bit," Remus replied, trying to perk up. "Lucky," Mary said. "I've got to go back to Croydon. Marlene invited me to stay, but Mum says she doesn't see enough of me as it is." "That's nice," Remus smiled. "It's nice to be missed." Peter and Dorcas left first, heading up the main road to find a secluded spot to hail the night bus. Remus waved them off and everything seemed fine, but that might just have been James's presence. The girls apparated, once Lily finally let go of James, promising to visit before the summer was over, promising to write, making James promise to telephone. She hugged Remus and then, perhaps just in a moment of blind happiness, Sirius too. James, Remus and Sirius apparated back to the Potters with somewhat more success than the first time. Remus ended up in the back garden somehow, Sirius somewhere in the village, but Mrs. Potter was thrilled to see them all the same and decided they all needed some proper food for once. Should we get in touch for the home? Should we get in touch with the home for you, Remus? Mr. Potter, not Mrs. Potter. My bad. "Should we get in touch with the home for you, Remus?" Mr. Potter asked casually over dinner. "You're not pulling another vanishing act, are you? Can't have the Muggle police called again." No, Remus stammered over his boiled potatoes. What could he say to make them stop asking? What would buy a bit more time? Sirius kicked him under the table and gave him a look. "Go on, Moony," he had said. "Tell them the truth." Remus looked at Mr. Potter. "Actually, now I'm 17, there isn't a place for me at St. Edmund's." "Oh, good!" "Oh, good!" Mrs. Potter smiled benignly. We've got you for the whole summer then. Wonderful." "As easy as that." "I told you," Sirius whispered as he slid into Remus's bed after midnight. "The Potters love taking in strays." "Should you be here?" Remus whispered back. "What about James?" "Snoring his head off. I could hear him through the wall." Remus didn't press it further. After all, he wanted Sirius there. It felt funny lying alone in a big double bed after a week spent squished up in a tent. Having another body close by was comforting. Having Sirius's body close by was even better. "Well done for telling them," Sirius said quietly, holding Remus's hand under the covers. He did that often and only in bed, in the dark. Remus didn't mind. "Yeah, I'm just telling everyone everything this week," Remus laughed. "Nothing wrong with asking for help, Moony. People like helping their friends." "I know." Remus kissed the top of Sirius's head, one of the many privileges now permitted to him. Sirius liked to sleep hidden under the covers, like a hibernating creature. It made him seem smaller than he was, and made Remus feel protective. Another thing that was okay to feel, now. "Sirius? Sirius? That thing Wormtail said, did it really upset you?" He felt Sirius tense against him and instantly wished he hadn't brought it up. He tried to cover his tracks. "Just, Pete, he's a bit of an idiot sometimes, but he's just thick, not spiteful. He gets used to it. He'll get used to it. Get used to me. Next time he needs his homework done, it won't matter." "I've heard stuff like that before, that's all," Sirius said very low, so that Remus, who had usually perfect hearing, better than perfect, had to listen closely. "About being a man, that sort of thing." "From your mother?" Sirius didn't speak, but his head moved slightly and Remus took it for a nod. "We aren't talking about mothers," Remus had to remind himself. He just squeezed Sirius's hand and said the only thing he could think of. "Well, then it was all bollocks." Saturday, 30th of July, 1977. James Potter was not as clever as Remus had given him credit for. They'd been back from Cornwall for a fortnight. James had telephoned Lily from the phone box at the end of the road at least exactly 14 times, and exactly 14 times Remus had to accompany James to the phone box, put the coins in the slot, dial the number for him, and show him how to hang up at the end. The phone calls lasted for about an hour usually, leaving Sirius and Remus to sit outside the brick wall, smoking. Occasionally they walked up and down the high street, but mostly they just waited for James to finish. "Bloody idiot," Remus sighed as he exited the booth the 14th time. "How hard is it to remember a few simple steps? He did Muggle studies. Don't they explain this stuff?" "Oh, he gets too excited to remember anything," Sirius laughed. "Have some sympathy for the lovesick fool." "No, I will be joyless and miserable forever," Remus grumbled, fumbling for his cigarette lighter. "Oh, good. I love it when you're all dark and moody." "Fuck off." "Oh, yeah. Now call me a stupid prat. That really gets me going," Sirius teased, cigarette between his teeth, embers glowing in his eyes. Remus shoved him so that he stumbled off the wall, laughing. You are being a stupid prat." "Only for you." Sirius stubbed out his cigarette. There was a low dark rumbling in the far distance, and Sirius's whole face lit up. He grabbed Remus's arm. "Look, here it comes! Right on time!" Remus rolled his eyes. Sirius had another reason to indulge James. Every evening, while they waited for the lovebirds to finish their phone call, a miraculous thing happened, in Sirius's eyes anyway. A motorbike drove through the village, probably some aging hippie on his way home from his boring commuter job, Remus thought petulantly. It was a Triumph Bonneville T120. Remus hated that he knew this, but after they'd seen it for the first time, Sirius had dragged him to the newsagents to buy every motorcyclist magazine he could find until they'd identified the model. With a cherry-red tank, every inch of chrome polished to a gleaming silver. Sirius was madly in love. Remus was madly jealous. Once the bike had passed, Sirius gave a sigh of satisfaction, then climbed back onto the wall and watched Remus for a while. He did that a lot now. Remus had to learn not to mind too much, being scrutinized. Sirius cocked his head. "Is it the moon, making you grumpy?" "Probably," Remus shrugged. "Usually makes me restless." "Yeah, I noticed. Last night." Sirius winked. "Oh my god, shut up, obnoxious prick!" Sirius grinned and poked out his sharp pink tongue. Remus was nervous about the moon. It would be his first full moon spent at either at Hogwarts or not spent at either Hogwarts or St. Edmunds, though presumably there'd been another full moon once, long ago, with his mother. Mr. Potter had taken him aside after it was agreed that Remus would be staying for the rest of the summer and explained their plan of action. Not that it mattered much to Remus. A locked room was a locked room. This time it was the attic, and Moody had offered to stand guard outside, ensuring that the family would be safe. Mr. and Mrs. Potter, not to mention James and Sirius, had repeatedly reassured Remus that they weren't concerned in the slightest and that he oughtn't to worry either. But of course he did anyway. Sirius wanted to go in with him, so did James, but James had at least enough common sense to realize it wouldn't be possible. No one was going to get anything past Moody, who had a new creepy eye, electric blue and horribly enchanted. "Tackled werewolves before," he said gruffly as Remus was led up the ladder to the attic. "Always got a good result. Minimal casualties." This did not make Remus feel better, but he wasn't sure if it was supposed to. It was a bad night. Maybe it was Moody's presence. Maybe the wolf didn't like heights. Maybe it could smell its usual playmates, Prongs and Padfoot, and felt lonely. Maybe the wolf just hated Remus. Who knew? Either way, when he woke, he found he'd ripped the room apart, torn at the blinds and scratched the floorboards. In the end, the wolf had chewed its own paws out of frustration. Hands bleeding, the skin all grazed away, Remus lay in the dark, his heart pounding, waiting for the pain to subside, or for someone to come and help him, whichever came first. Mrs. Potter patched him up and did a good job, but he still struggled to hold his wand for a few days while the skin grew back. He couldn't hold a broom handle either, so had to just watch while Peter, Sirius and James practiced, like old times. Remus found other ways to occupy himself. He got hold of a copy of a telephone book and spent more time than was probably healthy looking up every Jenkins in Bristol. There were lots of them, but no hopes. Hopeless. It didn't matter, he tried to tell himself. He got on all right for 12 years without her. "Tell me a secret," Sirius would whisper late at night, every night he came to Remus. "Tell me something no one knows." and Remus would tell him, because it made Sirius happy, and that was a very worthwhile pursuit. In fact, Remus was realizing making Sirius happy might be the only thing worth doing for the rest of his life. I'm the one who told Philomena Pettigrew to go to America. You never. Yep, in the bathroom on Christmas Eve. Sly bastard. How'd you get girls falling all over you to talk to you, eh? What's your secret? Maybe they trust me because they know I'm not trying to get off with them. An intriguing thought. Tell me another secret. I don't know. I've told you everything. Everything that wouldn't hurt you, he added silently. You haven't, Sirius said, his lips now against Remus's, as he crawled on top of him, hands sliding up Remus's nightshirt. He flicked his tongue along Remus's bottom lip. I'm going to know everything about you one day. I promise. Remus kissed him deeply, believing every word.
Aww. So I think I have the final piece of evidence, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt, Sirius is a psychopath. Who sleeps under the covers? Completely under the covers. You can't breathe.
Some people do.
I know some people do. I never understood it. I can't do it. I need fresh air when I sleep.
I mean, I can't do it either. I don't do it. I can't do it. I don't know. I don't know.
What?
I don't know.
I like all the descriptions, how he's kind of like a dog.
I know.
He turns into the dog and plays on the beach.
Yep.
And then, that's what Bailey does, actually. He curls up under the blanket right next to us.
Yeah, he does. He sleeps completely under the covers. He scratched behind his ear.
Yeah.
All that stuff is fun.
He did have a scary childhood. Yeah, maybe that's it. Because he says it's like a sheltering animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it might just be that layer of protection.
Yep, it could be.
You know, like when you were a kid and you were nervous.
You hide under the covers.
Boogeyman was under the bed, so you made sure your feet were covered.
Yeah.
That blanket is a lot of security.
Yeah, maybe it's a security thing for him. It could be.
And also, hello, Vane. Welcome.
Oh, yes. Hi, Vane.
Okay, so I guess there's other reasons, but I just, in general, I can't. I don't understand.
I get the doggy thing. I get the PTSD kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like it's a security thing, but yeah, I always feel like I'm suffocating. In his case, the scary monster was his mother. Yeah,
yes.
It definitely makes sense. It makes sense to me. This is all just like Remus just being in love and happy about it and enjoying it.
Right?
It's really all I'm getting from this. It's just he's having a good time being with Sirius, even though it's still kind of a secret, but
And moody. With his new electric blue eye.
His new creepy blue eye. Yeah. Love that.
Standing guard with constant vigilance.
That's right. Padfoot and Prongs are not getting away with
minimal casualties.
Yep. Yeah, they are so in love. Yeah, they are very much in love.
Oh, yeah.
And so is James.
And Lily, yes. And then, poor Peter. He's in a relationship too, but no one cares.
Yep.
Isn't anyone going to ask about me and whatever her name is?
Dorcas?
Dorcas, yes. Dorcas. No, I'm not going to ask because I laugh every time I say your girlfriend's name.
The whole thing with Peter saying that thing, like, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be good at this," and getting a stern talking to. I wonder if that's part of the divide further starting, because James obviously said something to him.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is it Remus's fault that Peter? Is it
maybe in this story?
Is it Remus coming out of the closet that triggers the divide that sends Peter to Voldemort?
Maybe. Maybe that's it.
I don't know.
Remus had just stayed in the closet. And that's why he gets so depressed later on, and why him and Sirius aren't together. Their relationship took too much away, so they couldn't be together anymore.
Well, it's 1977. If they stay together, they're only going to be together for a couple of years.
What do you mean? Oh, until James. Yeah.
Are they going to stay together?
Unless they allow conjugal visits. That's why Remus knows how to deal with the Dementors so easily.
Cast a
so
lot of
practiced.
Patronuses over the years.
Ate a lot of chocolate. Like a lot.
I mean, he's gonna think Sirius did it.
Yeah. I know. I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying he's gonna think he's in love with Sirius. He's literally been in love with Sirius for like 110 chapters of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's gonna think that he did it.
Soul crushing. Poor Remus. Poor Sirius.
Yeah, poor Remus, poor Sirius. At least James and Lily are dead. They don't have to deal with that. They're just dead.
If that whole aspect of the Harry Potter story wasn't heartbreaking enough for you, welcome to All the Young Dudes, where we make it worse.
We're
going to add a new layer of emotion into there for you to cry over.
Yep. You thought you cried over Dobby's death. You thought you cried over Sirius's death.
Nothing's going to beat Dobby's death.
Yeah, fair enough.
They can't. No, nothing.
Fair enough. Dobby is devastating.
I've never hated a character more when I first met them and loved them more when they died.
Yeah.
Than Dobby.
It's such good writing, isn't it?
Yeah, his character was a great story arc.
His character was, I think, one of those smaller touches that was just so brilliantly done.
Yeah. It's like very under the radar for most of it.
Yeah.
And then you don't really know until the last minute, and then he dies, and you're just like, oh my god.
You hate him throughout the entirety of the second book, and then you meet him again in the fourth book, and
things have changed.
Things change, and he helps Harry, and he's not as obnoxious. And then you see him again in the sixth book, and you love him by the sixth book because him and Creature, like, getting into that fist fight is great.
You don't say bad things about Harry Potter.
Yep.
Oh, hi, Joey. How you been?
Oh my gosh, hello, welcome. Welcome. And then in the end, he saves him. It's just, oh, it's so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking. And it does a total 180 from him nearly killing Harry to try to save his life to sacrificing himself to save Harry's life.
Exactly.
Oh, it's just so God-rolling. Yeah, in the movie he does say that. Such a beautiful place to be with friends.
Yeah, I know we talk bad about the movies quite a bit on this channel, but I think Dobby's death scene was done very well.
Yeah.
They did it justice.
I think the last thing he says is Harry Potter.
Yeah.
In the books. You know what else really gets me in 7? Other than a lot of things. It's a very, very small things. It's a very, very small thing, but one of the things that really gets me is 7 is when they get to Xenophilius Lovegood's house, and Harry looks up at the ceiling at Luna's room, and he sees the painting that she did of all of them, and now she just writes friends around all of it. Oh my god, that kills me every time. I'm just like, oh, Luna, it gets me.
Right.
It's like
Luna's great.
It's like 3 sentences, and it just kills me.
Yeah, so the whole idea of the protection is not necessarily just mother's love. Like, yes, that's like the most powerful love is what they're trying to get across, but could someone who just loved someone else put that protection on? Well, yeah, because Harry puts
does
the
it.
protection.
Yeah, Harry
So
does
yeah,
it.
I wonder if Dobby put some sort of protection on Harry.
He could have.
Maybe Dobby put some protection on Harry, and that's why when Voldemort does try to kill him, he doesn't fully die.
Well, he's got the Lily love protection.
Yeah.
But maybe he does have a little bit of Dobby love protection. I don't know. It's possible. I don't know if it only works with people.
Yeah, but no, the Lily love protection was canceled out. Because Voldemort had Harry's blood. I'm talking about in the forest.
Oh. Got you. Got you.
You know, it's not as powerful, but it was enough to keep Harry alive.
Right. I don't know if Dobby is the reason. I wouldn't say Dobby is the reason why Harry doesn't die. Because Harry could have chosen to die.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I wonder if maybe house elf magic is different. Maybe it isn't as powerful as, say, a mother's magic.
I don't know.
So,
interesting idea, though.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Joey says that there's a makeup artist who gives him Luna vibes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Marcelo, hello. Welcome to the end of the stream. It's an interesting concept, though. I don't know. I know that I don't think it had anything to do with whether or not Harry died when Voldemort Avada Kedavra'd him in the forest, though.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. We were talking about it, and like,
because Harry could have. I think the Cruciatus curse doesn't affect him in the forest because he's mastered death. I think is what it is. He's
Cruciatus isn't death; it's just pain.
Right, but I think there's an element to Harry dying, surviving, coming back. I think there could be some kind of unknown element to that. Right? Because they do the Cruciatus curse on him after he dies, right? Don't they try to like just defile his body? I think.
I can't remember. I'd have to go back and read that.
I know, I understand.
But maybe. I think the idea that he
use the bigger text.
He mastered death would be a pretty cool thing. You gonna look it up?
I gotta look at it for a second. I gotta see. Do they do the Cruciatus?
I thought he did feel it, but he like.
Yeah, no, he doesn't feel it. Nope, he doesn't feel it.
Okay.
I think it's got something to do with the fact that he died, and he was truly the master of death. I think there's some kind of element to that now he is just impervious to that.
Okay.
I think if we had the time, we could go into it further, but I think there's got to be something to do with his self-sacrifice and all of that. It's got to be something with that.
That would be fun to research and do for a video or a next live stream.
Why doesn't Harry feel the curse? Yeah. Voldemort also thinks that Harry is Oh, yeah. The reason why none of his spells stick. Yeah, Harry does explain it at the end, doesn't he? Maybe that's what it is. He's 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 not the master of the Elder Wand. That's part of it.
Oh yeah.
The wand doesn't work properly for him. I think that's um
Ooh. So okay, that makes sense then. Voldemort's first sign that he's not the master.
yeah. I think that's part of it. He's not the master of the Elder Wand.
Okay.
So the spells aren't working.
Kind of makes the whole battle in the movie kind of seem needless.
Well, the whole battle in the movie was needless anyway. It was terrible.
Yeah, but I mean, in a movie, you gotta add some of those big action. I didn't hate it.
I hated it.
I didn't. I mean,
I hated it.
I thought it was pretty cool for like an action scene, but I do think how it ends in the books is much more powerful.
It's much more powerful in the books, and
But in movie terms, it's kind of just blah.
but
And
you
I get it. You want to end it with this extravagant
Right.
explosions and lights and colors and
but
magic.
you also need that conversation to happen.
Yeah, that's true. You
That
could have still ended in the
conversation needed to
conversation.
happen. Harry and Voldemort needed to talk about that. And
I think at that point, the directors just assumed everyone's read the books. They know what's happening.
it just the conversation needed to happen. And I agree, Dan. Even if you were gonna do like a big battle sequence, why couldn't you at least keep it in like the school, or at least it happens in the Great Hall? Why couldn't you have at least stuck with a location
Yeah.
instead of flying all over random places in the school? Like, I just I hated it.
I feel
hated
like
it.
there was probably pressure from the studio or maybe the director or someone to have like this big ending fight scene.
I think we'll have to
Some big
definitely.
finale.
I think we'll have to touch back on this Cruciatus thing at some point. Those are just my thoughts off the top of my head
Yeah.
with the Cruciatus curse.
I feel like there
but-
could be more theories.
well, I think we could also come up with like more explanation, but those are just the things that.
But the fact that he wasn't the master of the Elder Wand does make sense, but
Yeah. And yeah, Voldemort doesn't react to Bellatrix dying in the movie, whereas he actually does have a reaction
Yeah.
to her death. Like, there's just, I get that you want a big final glorious battle sequence, but I hated it. I just hated it.
I thought the battle itself wasn't bad, but you gotta still contain. It still has to contain those story elements, like you said. You know, they don't have the conversation.
Yeah,
Or
like
the whole thing with Bellatrix.
they don't. Harry doesn't explain anything.
Yeah, I think if you could have had that battle, but just have that same like standoff at the end. You know, have like a battle or whatever, and then
How many Western movies have you seen where the two dudes are facing off and you do shots back and forth? You could have done like a
right. Or apparently that director has never watched an anime.
right.
Because you have to have at least 3 episodes worth of conversation before a fight can occur.
Right. And you could have had that conversation happen in a tense, high stakes manner.
Yeah.
You could have done it. I think that film is a different venue. It's a different medium, so you'd have to do it differently to make it visually entertaining.
Yeah.
But you could do it. But yes, it's Hollywood wanting action over dialogue.
And I will be the first one to say I don't hate that. I mean, I'm all for a good action movie where you can just turn off your brain and like Fast and the Furious movies. I really haven't seen the last few, but honestly, I kept watching them just because it was. I know that scientific part of my brain is just like, physics don't work like that. No, that can't happen. But at the same time, it is cool to turn off your brain. But when
But
you have
but
an
that's what those
in-depth
movies.
story,
That's what those movies are supposed to be.
that's
right?
what I mean. It has to be original content. You can't take a very deep, in-depth story that has all this lore and fandom behind it, where millions of people have read and analyzed the text, and then just have free reign of it. Like I said, you could add in that action, but don't take away the substance. You
Yeah.
know, even if you
Yeah.
had this awesome battle and then it was like, like you were saying, the Western where they like yell stuff to each other from cover and stuff, and then
Yeah. You could have done it. If you're making an action movie, then make an action movie. Don't take something that's clearly not an action story and then turn it into one.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great when Harry just keeps calling him Riddle over and over and calls him
Yeah.
Tom and all that. It's great. You dare? Yes, Riddle, I dare. Like it's great. It's so good. Ruined.
I will dare all I want to, Tommy.
Tomas. I hate to be that person, but I do need to eat.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
I need the food.
It is about that time.
So,
So, thank you all for a wonderful stream.
yes, this has been good. We got through a lot of. We read like 4 chapters.
Yeah,
3 or 4. 4. We
Look
read
at
like
that.
4 chapters.
we didn't go off on too many tangents.
No, we stuck to the script.
Normally we get through like 2 chapters. The rest of the time we're just talking.
I know. Right now we're talking so much we're gonna go on a rant about the movies for a half hour if we don't stop now.
All right.
So,
So,
thank
we
you
will
everybody.
We will see you guys this Thursday for another stream and continuing of all the young dudes. And we're getting super close to the end.
Yes, we are. So we will see you next week.